Hopefully you've been watching the other videos. You already have a good feel for what the book of Zechariah is about, who he is. He's one of the quote-unquote minor prophets from the Old Testament, and he has received very detailed visions from Jesus himself, it appears. In the first chapters of Zechariah, we've been deciphering those and the symbolism, and even realizing that many of them apply to us today here in the United States, and so many of us have been missing this. I know I didn't even realize some of the things that I just discovered as I've been redoing my study of Zechariah in order to prepare for this series that God asked me to do, and now I understand why. By the way, he's given me a very detailed understanding of the church today. I'm having a much better understanding of it. And he's helping me even see signs that are indicating which church is which in the categories of the churches in the book of Revelation. I'm realizing very clearly that all 7 churches of Revelation chapter 2 and 3 are present today. And they will become clearer as time goes by, which is which. And I'm going to do future videos on that. So stay tuned. Regardless, let's jump into this. What I'm going to do, this is different. You'll notice in verse 1 of chapter 9, it says, the burden of the word of the Lord. It's a little different. It is, the others were visions, and sometimes he just spoke to Zechariah and told him things. But this word burden, it's a common word. You may see in the Old Testament associated with prophetic words God gives to people. And it's an interesting concept, this idea that a prophetic word is a burden. I've heard other people who receive words from God in this way refer to it as a burden. You know, it's like it weighs on you, it burns in you. You can't rest until it comes out. God compels it once he's given it to you. And it's also weighty. It's very weighty. And people don't want to hear it usually. So that's part of why it's called a burden. You know, it's not the gift of the word of the Lord. I mean, it is a spiritual gift, but I think maybe you understand what I'm saying. In this case, notice though, it says the burden of the word of the Lord. We kind of miss those little things. Not the burden is the word of the Lord. The word of the Lord is what? It's Jesus, it's Yeshua, right? So, he is the Logos. So this is Logos, Jesus speaking to him. Jesus is the Logos of Yahweh. He is the Logos of God. He's the one who gives these words. He's throughout the Old Testament. So many people miss it. So I'm going to read through this, and I'm going to explain the historical context, and then I'm going to go back in and pull out better and deeper spiritual meanings. So the burden of the word of the Lord against the land of Hadrach and Damascus, its resting place, for the eyes of men and all the tribes of Israel are on the Lord, and against Hamath, which borders on it, and against Tyre and Sidon, though they are very wise. These are all cities in Lebanon or Syria. Hadrach, everybody seems to be in agreement. It's only mentioned once in the Bible here, and it corresponds to a city up in northwestern Syria near the Turkish border, that today is an archaeological site called Tel Afis. In their time, it might be referred to as Hazarek in other languages, or Hatarika in Neo-Assyrian. What is Neo-Assyrian? It was the Assyrian language after Babylon conquered them. Okay, so I believe that's correct. I'm not an expert on Assyria, so if I got that wrong, forgive me. But Hatarika was destroyed, and it looks like may have been destroyed during the Babylonian conquest. Not sure, but it is not. It didn't really have much of a history after around 600 BC, and Zechariah is preaching this. He's giving this word around the early 500 BC. You know, I think 516, 518 BC. We said, so it'd be like 100 years after that city was prominent or has any known history. Could it have been still Active, yeah. We don't have the fullest of records like you might think. Archaeologists don't actually have all the historical records you might think. We don't actually know what happened every year in every place around the world. Most of history has been lost. So it could have been active, but I noticed the phrase against the land of Hadrach and Damascus its resting place. Now we all know where Damascus is. It's more in the southern part of Syria there near close to Lebanon and Israel. And that phrase tells me the land of Hadrach and Damascus is resting place. Hadrach back then, Hadarika was a important city, and then it got destroyed. So perhaps the people from the land of Hadrach after it was destroyed, that city, had to go in exile, and they rested in Damascus. Like they're exiled and went to Damascus. So that is probably what I'm understanding from it. For the eyes of men and all the tribes of Israel are on the Lord, also against Hamath, which borders on it, which is little, like again, southern Syria, and against Tyre and Sidon, though they are very wise, which are on the Lebanese coast. So those are all cities in that area. For Tyre built herself a tower, heaped up silver like the dust, and gold like the mire on the streets, the dung on the streets. Behold, the Lord will cast her out. He will destroy her power in the sea, and she will be devoured by fire. Ashkelon shall see it and fear. Gaza, so again, that was talking about Tyre up there in southern Lebanon, but it says, Ashkelon shall see it and fear. Gaza also shall be very sorrowful. And Ekron, for he dried up her expectation. The king shall perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon shall not be inhabited. Those are four cities from the Philistines, four of the five main cities of the Philistines. Three were mentioned there. Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron. And then a mixed race shall settle in Ashdod, which is the fourth city of the Philistines. And I will cut off the pride of the Philistines, and I will take away the blood from his mouth, and the abominations from between his teeth. But he who remains, even he shall be for our God, and shall be like a leader in Judah, and Ekron like a Jebusite. Ekron is, again, a city of the Philistines. The Jebusite is referring to those Canaanites that were living in Jerusalem before David conquered Jerusalem. I will camp around my house, which is in Jerusalem, because of the army, because of him who passes by, and him who returns. No more shall an oppressor pass through them, for now I have seen with my eyes. Now, so nice. I mean, it's just kind of a prophetic passage many people would kind of look over, but there's a little more to it here than you would think. Let's look at the context, what's going on in Zechariah's time. Well, time of Zechariah, Ezra, Nehemiah, 500, 400 BC. They were coming back from Babylon, rebuilding Jerusalem, rebuilding the temple, and Ezra and Nehemiah, you see them rebuilding the wall and other things like that. And they were being opposed. They were being opposed by men from the Philistines, by men from what's now Jordan, Ammon, and Moab, by men from Samaria, which was the old capital of the northern kingdom of Israel that had, after Assyria took them away, they put a new people in Samaria, where the northern kingdom had been headquartered, and those mixed with the remnant of the former Israelites, and that became a mixed breed people, which were called the Samaritans, and those were the Samaritans of Jesus' day. But, and then of course, the Syrians up there in Syria were against them as well. So you had these peoples really on three sides of Israel, really, and the Edomites. Let's not forget the Edomites on the south. So really all four sides of Israel, countries were against them rebuilding Jerusalem and the temple. They didn't like them. Obviously, they're inspired by the enemy. They're trying to stop them. And Ezra and Nehemiah tell about some of that conflict and how God resolved it. So in this case, what this is Zechariah is telling them to rebuild the temple. And as they're doing this, their fear can creep in. This is a big sign politically. We are rebuilding the temple. That's a clear sign. We are staying here. We're not going anywhere. We're going to have a religious center. We're building something. We're building something important, because the temple is not going to be a small thing. It's going to be a significant structure. And it's even going to provoke to jealousy these other peoples who might not have something So, and they're obviously claiming this is the temple of the God of the universe, right? And he has a temple nowhere else. So that also provokes jealousy. And then you have Tyre and Sidon, which are filled with Baal worship, which as are the others. So controlled by the enemy, wanting to stop the work of Yahweh. In the midst of that, the people would have had some fear. They would have been looking at their enemies, kind of like we look at Russia and China today, but maybe more so because they were more keenly aware of the dangers and didn't have a false sense of security like we may have in the United States. Because back then they'd just come out of exile and they were still small and weak and felt it. So their eyes would have been watching attentively to see what their enemies would do. And even though some prophets are saying you don't have to fear, and Zechariah himself is saying that, he's saying, I'm going to plant you. You don't have to fear now. The exile is done. They have to choose to have faith to believe those words. You know, they had to choose to have faith that Zechariah was hearing from God and whether or not they were going to trust the words of Zechariah as the words of God. You know, and that wasn't any easier for them as it was for us today to listen to somebody saying they have the words of God and trusting that they are, and believe them. So they were watching. That's what this phrase means. For the eyes of men and all the tribes of Israel are on the Lord. They're watching the Lord to see what he's going to do. So he's telling them what he's going to do. He's telling them how he's going to protect them from these Syrians and Tyre and Sidon and these peoples. All right. And we're gonna talk about how he protected them. So in verse 3 of 4, he says, for Tyre built herself a tower, heaped up silver like the dust, and gold like the mire in the streets. To know the history of Tyre is to know, you really do need to understand the Tyre. It's actually a fulfillment of a specific prophecy in Ezekiel. I remember when I was in college, I was in a, I don't know what my teacher thought of me, but I was in a website class, and we were supposed to design a website that, oh my God, we were supposed to design it was just HTML, that's all we had, and it was very, very basic. I'm 50, so back in 94, 95, 30 years ago, all we had was HTML. And I was supposed to design a website, just have a couple of pages that interact with each other with hyperlinks and stuff. And brand new technology. So I did. I created one, and you could make it about anything you wanted. So I knew that my teacher was an atheist. So I created a website that they would have to review, which basically proved the existence of God. And I gave certain proofs, but one of the proofs I gave was the fulfillment of the prophecy against Tyre that's laid out in Ezekiel and elsewhere. And I remember their face was like, oh, like they just didn't know what to do with it, but they had to read it and consider it. So it was, I don't know, I thought it was funny. But anyways, Tyre, here's the deal. Tyre is this city. It's still there. I mean, southern Lebanon, there's a city there now, and that's kind of the inheritor of it. But Tyre became a very important city about the time of King Solomon and David. And it's a good question as to exactly who populated it. There's different possibilities, and I really have not looked into it enough to come to a conclusion for sure on my own. Most think that it was just kind of Mediterranean peoples that populated it. Obviously it's most famous for providing cedars of Lebanon to Solomon to build his temple with. They were known for being very wealthy, and that's why they heaped up silver like the dust and gold like the dung of the streets. How did they get so wealthy? Well, they were basically the launchers of the Phoenician Empire. They sent ships out everywhere. I heard ships of Tarshish was a type of ship that Tyre sent out. It was like like cargo ships, right? They did trade and cargo trading everywhere, and they got rich off it. They had ports. They had two harbors in Tyre. They had one face in the north and one face in the south. The north one, I forget what it was called, but the southern was called the Egyptian harbor. So, curiously, I mean, the Phoenicians, basically the Tyre is the Phoenicians are Tyre. But here's what's interesting and why I'm not so sure they were just a normal Mediterranean people. They could have been Edomites. They could have been from the tribe of Dan that just went corrupt. They could have been, but wherever they came from, guess what they spoke? They spoke Hebrew. They were very closely associated with Israel and Judah in Jerusalem, because if you go anywhere in the world, anywhere archaeologists go in the world, and they find a Phoenician colony, and you think Tyre, think Phoenicia, you will find engravings. Those engravings are always in Hebrew, specifically Paleo Hebrew, and the letters are not distinguished from Hebrew. The words are Hebrew. The phrases, the grammar, everything's Hebrew. So why are we distinguishing between Phoenician and Hebrew? I don't know. In fact, what you actually find out is if you really look at history without secular lenses on, you see that before the Assyrian Empire rose, around the time of Solomon, the Phoenician Empire was the big empire, and it controlled all of the sea trade in the Mediterranean, and around the world, and they were the power. Okay, and that matches Solomon's empire, which the Bible describes as having that much power and influence and wealth. And somehow archaeologists can't find Solomon's empire, but they do find a massive Phoenician empire that did everything Solomon's empire was supposed to have done. And the Phoenicians spoke Hebrew, and they had ships, just like the Bible says Solomon had. And they know that Tyre did all this trade with Solomon and gave it. And okay, why are we saying the Phoenician empire wasn't Solomon's empire? I don't know. I guess because we're secular and we just don't like to confirm the Bible's true. That would seem to be the truth. Anyways, Tyre, the Phoenicians, and look, even our alphabet is called the Phoenician alphabet. Our alphabet comes from the Phoenician alphabet. That's why the Paleo Hebrew letter Aleph looks like our letter A on its side. We get it from that. Tyre founded the colonies of Carthage, etc. And they had colonies in Ireland. They were all over the place. The Phoenicians kept the Greeks and the Romans locked up on their little peninsulas for a long time. They wouldn't let them out of the Mediterranean. They controlled who came in and out of the Straits of Gibraltar. And there's even evidence that the Phoenicians came to the Americas, thousands of years, or 1,500 years, thousands of years before Columbus. And we've even found some Paleo-Hebrew inscriptions from the Phoenicians in the Americas. There's lots of hidden history around this. But anyways, Tyre was an important city. And the Phoenician Empire really exploded. The colonies exploded as far as like growth and population and stuff around the Mediterranean. At the exact time, there was a huge drought and famine in Israel caused by the prophet Elijah. Right as Ahab is on the throne, and Jezebel, his wife, who was from Tyre, and Tyre was the source of Baal worship in Israel. Right at that time when Elijah's causing this drought that took all the rain from the land, no food and everything, all of a sudden, all these Phoenician immigrants are like going around the world establishing colonies elsewhere. Coincidence? Anyways, at the time Nebuchadnezzar came and attacked Jerusalem, about that same time he also attacked Tyre, and he laid siege to it for a long time, a number of years, and he couldn't take it. Tyre had two parts. They had an island city that was built on a rock out in the Mediterranean, not too far offshore, and then they had another part of the city on the shore. Well, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed that first part of the city, but he could never get the guys on the island. He had to leave it alone and just kind of negotiate with them. But they were known as being very wealthy. Well, after that, Alexander the Great came through in the 300 BCs. And he swept through and destroyed, attacked and laid siege to Damascus and all these areas in Lebanon, and he also destroyed the Philistines and their cities down here, which are also referenced. Like he cleared the whole area, conquering it, and he did conquer and destroy Tyre. And the way he did it is he took the rubble from the ruins of the city that Nebuchadnezzar destroyed, and he and his soldiers, well, his soldiers at his orders, cast that rubble into the Mediterranean to build a causeway, to build a walkway, basically a rocky path, out to the island fortress of Tyre, so they could lay siege and attack it out there directly without having to be in boats. And that worked. They destroyed it, he conquered it, and that was the end of him. And that is what's being referenced here in verses 3 and 4, is Alexander the Great's conquest. In fact, all of this is referring to Alexander the Great's conquest. And there's a very interesting story I'm going to read to you about what happened when he got to Jerusalem. Regardless, Israel's situation is they are looking at Damascus, the land of Hadrach, Hamath, Tyre. So they're looking at them with fear, as if these guys have power, they have money, they might come after us to stop us at some point. And now the name Hadrach, nobody really knows what it means today. I can't find anybody that's translated. They only say it's a Neo-Assyrian language, okay, or word. So since that's all we have available to us, I'm going to limit myself to that and the application, and basically the land of the Neo-Assyrian name Hadrach. The second level of meaning to this is it's referring to a land that is psychologically threatening the exiles from Babylon with the past, reminding them of what Assyria did to the Northern Empire. And they're looking at that same area. Hadrach is right up in that area. And Neo-Assyrian, they're fearful of it. Damascus is the resting place of these men. They're watching the Lord. What's he going to do? And he says, the burden of the word of God against the land of Hadrach. So God is saying, I'm against you, land of Hadrach, and Damascus, its resting place. Also against Hamath, which is this other big city, and Tyre and Sidon. Hamath means a protective wall, a boundary. And Tyre means rock, and Sidon means fishery or fishing place. So the meanings of those names, it's like a 1, 2, 3 punch of conquest. He's saying, I'm against your protective wall, Hadrach being the land. All of these are part of the land of Hadrach. I'm against your protective wall, I'm against your foundation, and I'm against your fishery. Meaning I'm going to destroy your protection, I'm going to destroy your foundation, and I'm going to destroy your provision. I feel like that is a secondary meaning to it. But Tyre built herself this tower when Nebuchadnezzar attacked earlier. They went out into the sea and built the tower to escape Nebuchadnezzar and be protected. They escaped for a time. They're still heaping up silver like dust, getting rich. So much gold is like dung in the streets. But the Lord, with Alexander the Great, is going to cast her out. He's going to destroy her power in the sea. And she will be devoured by fire. And this happened. Ashkelon. So all these cities are in the Philistines area, and they are trembling. They're seeing this. Alexander the Great destroyed Tyre. And if Tyre can't resist, then what are they going to do? Tyre's rich, and they have an island fortress. We don't have that. And that's why Ashkelon shall see it and fear. Gaza also shall be very sorrowful. This is not applying to today. I believe this is definitely fulfillment in the past. There could be a modern fulfillment, but I don't see one right now. Ekron, for he dried up her expectation. Ekron had some kind of plans. Maybe she was going to try to become a major trading city like Tyre. Not anymore. The king shall perish from Gaza. That means that Alexander the Great killed the king of Gaza. And Ashkelon shall not be inhabited. Ashkelon, after he conquers it, would be decimated and wiped. A mixed race shall settle in Ashdod. So I believe that is referring to the Edomites. There is an interesting thing, and I think this is being referenced here, is um, the Edomites were originally, these are the descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother, were originally in southern Israel. But by the time of Jesus, right before the time of Jesus, they had migrated west, and not, I'm sorry, did I say Israel? They were in southern Jordan, right? They were in southern Jordan where Petra is. But by the time of Jesus, or right before that, in the time of Maccabees, they had merged over, they had migrated over to the west and had occupied the Negev, the southern part of Israel. And I think I have suspected that they are even, that the current Palestinians in the Gaza Strip may be as much related to Edom as they are to the Philistines, or they may even be mainly Edom and not the Philistines. That would make sense of some prophecies that I've been puzzling with. I don't think that would be the only place Edom went. There's evidence that Edom was also exiled, but by the time of Jesus, the Maccabees kind of conquered. The Jews in that time, at the time of the Maccabees, they forced the Edomites in southern Israel to become Jewish. They forced them to convert to Judaism and adopt all the law and everything. And from that point forward, the Edomites, which was referred to as Edomia, became very zealous Jews for the law. And the Pharisees, some of them may have actually been Edomites. Herod the Great was an Edomite due to that whole situation. So I believe this mixed race shall settle in Ashdod. I believe that's referring to the Edomites coming in after the Philistines were wiped out and kind of intermarrying and mingling with the remnant that was left, similar to what happened in Samaria. I will take away the blood from his mouth, the Philistine's mouth, and the abominations from between his teeth. That means that, the Philistines had a very unbiblical diet, and they're eating meat with blood in it. They're eating meat raw, or they're not draining the blood out of the animals, or maybe you think about things like blood sausage. They're treating it like a delicacy, and they're eating all kinds of unclean animals. And that's what it means, remove the abominations from between his teeth. Well, if Esau came in and mixed with them, that could fix it, because Esau would have had some level of faithfulness to God's will with the dietary habits, but especially as the Edomites were forced to become Jewish, that was fulfilled. But he who remains, even he shall be for our God, which I just said. The Edomites moved in, mixed, and then they became faithful Jews. This is a prophecy of that. And shall be like a leader in Judah. That happened. Herod the Great, as I said, and some of the Pharisees and Sadducees were Edomites. And Ekron like a Jebusite. So these Edomites that are inhabiting Ekron after in the Philistine land are later becoming Jewish Edomites, religiously Jewish, physically Edomite, and intermarrying and becoming involved in the leadership of Jerusalem. And it may be that the ones who were responsible for killing Jesus may have been primarily Edomites and not actually Jews. That's possible. I will camp around my house in Jerusalem because of the army, because of him who passes by and him who returns. No more shall an oppressor pass through them, for now I have seen with my eyes. So he's making a promise to protect Jerusalem from the attack of Alexander the Great. He's saying Alexander's going to come in. He's going to destroy the whole land of Syria, conquer it all. He's going to even burn and destroy Tyre, which was unconquerable by Nebuchadnezzar. He's going to come down the coast and wipe out the Philistines. And then he's going to come around to Jerusalem, and I will camp around my house, says God. And you will not have an oppressor. So let's read the story of what happened with Alexander the Great, and then we'll break for this video, and I'll do the second half of Zechariah in another video. Let me see, where is it? I had it pulled up here. Oh no, did I lose it? Nope, here it is. Okay, this is Josephus. If you don't know who Josephus is, he was a Jewish historian who lived during the Roman Empire. And this is the story he relates about Alexander the Great on this conquest. And what happened when he came to Jerusalem. It said, now Alexander, when he had taken, this is in the Antiquities book, volume 11.8.4-5. Now Alexander, when he had taken Gaza and made haste to go up to Jerusalem, and Jaddua, the high priest, when he heard that, was in agony and under terror, as not knowing how he should meet the Macedonians from Greece, since the king was displeased at his foregoing disobedience. He therefore ordained that the people should make supplications. So the high priest is taking control of the people, and he's telling everybody, we gotta pray. Alexander the Great is coming here to destroy Jerusalem. Pray. He therefore ordained that the people should make supplications and should join him with him in offering sacrifices to God, whom he besought to protect that nation. He is doing what's correct. Instead of building up an army, they prayed to God. They repented and turned to God and asked for help, and to deliver them from the perils which were coming upon them. Whereupon God warned him in a dream which came upon him after he had offered sacrifice, that he should take courage, adorn the city. Notice a dream, it's done through a dream. Adorn the city and open the gates. Don't lock yourself up like you're defending against an attack. Be open, inviting, decorate. You're not mourning, you're not scared, you're celebrating. Let him in. Open the gates, that the rest appear in white garments, but that he and the priest should meet the king in habits proper to the order, in the priestly garments, without the dread of any ill consequences which the providence of God would prevent. Upon which, when he arose from his sleep, he greatly rejoiced and declared to all the warning he had received from God. According to the dream, he acted entirely, and so waited for the coming of the king. And when he understood that he was not far from the city, Jerusalem, Jaddua the priest went out in procession, like a parade, with the priests and the multitude of the citizens. The procession was venerable, and the manner of it different from that of other nations. It reached to a place called Sapha, which name, translated in Greek, signifies a prospect. For you have thence a prospect, both of Jerusalem and of the temple. And when the Phoenicians and the Chaldeans that followed him thought they should have liberty to plunder the city of Jerusalem and torture the high priest to death, which the king's displeasure fairly promised them, the very reverse of it happened. For Alexander, when he saw the multitude at a distance, when he saw this parade at a distance, in white garments, while the priest stood clothed with fine linen, and the high priest in purple and scarlet clothing, with his mitre on his head and having, or turban on his head, and the golden plate on which the name of God was engraved, says, Holiness to the Lord, he approached by himself and adored that name. He adored the name of Yahweh. And first saluted the high priest. The Jews also did all together with one voice salute Alexander and encompass him about. Whereupon the kings of Syria and the rest were surprised at what Alexander had done, and supposed him to be disordered in his mind. However, Parmenio, Alexander's second in command, alone went up to him and asked him how it came to pass that when all others adored him, he should adore the high priest of the Jews. To whom he replied, I did not adore him, but that God who has honored him with that high priesthood. For I saw this very person in a dream, in this very habit, when I was at Dios in Macedonia, who, when I was considering with myself how I might obtain the dominion of Asia, exhorted me to make no delay, but boldly pass over the sea thither, for that he would conduct my army and would give me dominion over the Persians. Whence it is that having seen no other in that habit, and now seeing this person in it, and remembering my vision and the exhortation which I had in my dream, I believe that I bring this army under divine conduct, and shall therewith conquer Darius and destroy the power of the Persians, and that all things will succeed according to what is in my own mind. And when he said this to Parmenio, and had given the high priest his right hand, the priest ran along by him, And he came into the city, and when he went up to the temple, he offered sacrifice to God, according to the high priest's direction, and magnificently treated both the high priest and the priest. And when the book of Daniel was showed him, wherein Daniel declared that one of the Greeks should destroy the empire of the Persians, he supposed that himself was the person intended. And as he was then glad, he dismissed the multitude for the present. But the next day he called them to him and bade them ask what favors they pleased of him. Whereupon the high priest desired that they might enjoy the laws of their forefathers and might pay no tribute on the 7th year. He granted all they desired, and when they entreated him that he would permit the Jews in Babylon and Media to enjoy their own laws also, he willingly promised to do hereafter what they desired. And when he said to the multitude that if any of them would enlist themselves in his army on this condition, that they should continue under the laws of their forefathers and live according to them, and he was willing to take them with him, many were ready to accompany him in his wars. So, Alexander goes to conquer Jerusalem. The priest is fearful. The people are afraid. He says, pray. That night, the high priest got a dream. Jesus appeared to him and said, everybody dressed in white, go out in your priestly garments, do a parade. No fear, you're going to be fine. Alexander shows up. They're ready to conquer. And instead of conquering, Alexander himself runs over to the high priest and honors and worships the name of Yahweh on the high priest's turban. The rest of Alexander's men think he's crazy, but his second in command runs up to him and says, what are you doing? Why'd you do this? And he said, I was back in our home country, and I was thinking, how can I conquer Asia? How can I conquer Persia? And I had a dream, and I saw a man dressed just like this man, which was Jesus in his dream. And Alexander's saying, Jesus told him to go ahead and conquer Persia, and that he would empower him to conquer Persia. And now Alexander's saying, and I've been conquering all these cities in Syria, etc., not sure if I really could trust that, I guess is what he's saying. And then as I come to, but I've not seen anybody dressed in those garments. And now as I come to Jerusalem, I see a high priest dressed like the man I saw, the angel of the Lord I saw. And so I worshiped the name, which is the real one who told me that I believe is God. So Alexander the Great saw Jesus and was operating at his command, is what it says. The end result was, and they showed him the book of Daniel and the prophecies in Daniel. Alexander the Great was shown by the priest. Here's what Daniel says. Daniel says, you are going to conquer Persia. You're the horn on the ram that, or the goat that attacks the ram, I think it was. And so Alexander was happy and encouraged, and he said, what can I do for you? And the priest said, hey, right now, we want to just follow the law of God. We want you to leave us alone to follow the laws of Yahweh without telling us how to live. And we don't want to pay you taxes every 7th year because that's our Sabbath year. And we want the Jews in Babylon and Media and Persia to please be able to follow the Jewish laws there too and not have to follow Greek laws there. And he said, that's great, I will do that. And if any of your Jewish men want to join my army, then I will also let them observe Jewish laws in my army. So overall, what is happening is Alexander the Great's conquest is allowing for Jewish life to be protected throughout the world empires. And this is one of the reasons why Jesus is empowering Alexander the Great to conquer Persia and Babylon, right? Because they were not allowing that. And this sets the stage for the New Testament when you see pockets of Jews in all these Roman cities, Roman and Greek cities, where they're operating peacefully, they're involved in leadership, they're involved in business, they're doing their synagogues, they're living their separate life without being persecuted. And that was all, and that's how Paul and the apostles were able to spread the gospel by going to these synagogues in all these cities. And if the Jews had not been able to live peaceably in those cities, they would have had to return home that system would have not been in place. The gospel would have been hindered. So this entire thing Jesus is doing with Alexander the Great to protect the Jews and set up the stage in the world so the gospel can go out. Incredible. Incredible how God works. He's amazing. 2 simple dreams and he changes world history. That's what you call power. So I will leave it there. We're going to move on to the second half of Zechariah probably next week. I'll be posting some other videos on some important topics here soon, but I hope you guys have a great day and keep studying.